Memphis, 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 Memphis. Nothing but Memphis. Everywhere we go, it's Memphis.
Welcome to On the Bluff, a Bluff City Media audio podcast. Stepping up to the microphone are your hosts, Kenny Stubblefield and Christian Fowler. Now, let's get to the show.
What's up, everyone, and welcome back to On the Bluff. I'm your host, Christian Fowler, and we're switching things up already. 3 episodes in, we're switching it up. I've got our digital content creator, head of digital content, Kenny Stubblefield, here with me as always. But if you're watching video, you see a new face on here, and that's former Memphis offensive lineman and current Sports 56 host, Gabe Kuhn, my guy.
Glad to be rolling, man. Glad to be going.
Before we get too far in the introduction, want to congratulate Gabe. If you don't follow him on social media, the boy put a ring on it.
Yeah. 7.5 years later, you know what I mean? So it's like it was less congratulations and more about times in the end of the day. But hey, I did, man. Finally got around to it.
He got around to it. So congrats to Gabe. So that was the quick intro for Gabe, but he's going to be the co-host for this show for On the Bluff moving forward. Obviously, very excited about that. And Kenny, we teased doing in person last week and changing the show to a live show in person, cameras, soundboards, mixers, the whole 9 yards. What's the update for everybody on that?
I mean, the stuff is on its way, right? Like it's in the mail. Amazon's got a hold of it right now. It's in the ports in Taiwan. It might never show up. Honestly, we don't know. But as soon as it gets here, we're going live, baby. I've already shown them the spot where we're going to be shooting at. It's if you remember Film Room at a previous place that we had a podcast, Gabe and Christian did a video, did some video content called Film Room, where we broke down specific games from the University of Memphis football team, and we shot it in my upstairs attic/office, and that's what we're going to be shooting on the Bluff, and I'm excited.
So we got supply chain issues, back order.
Listen, everything is supply chain, back order, recession, right? Everything's a recession. I don't even know. I'm just spouting words off right now, Gabe. I'm sorry.
Buzzwords, man. That's what it's all about.
It's a buzzword, right?
The gist of it is we're getting there, I guess. So it won't look the same as Film Room. It'll be a little bit more high quality as far as camera angles, microphones, backdrops. It's gonna be a little more high quality.
It's not gonna.
But you'll see.
It's
not gonna look like that. But you'll see me back with the two big fellas, Kenny and Gabe. We'll all have cameras on us. We'll all be talking. Kenny might not talk as much. We had to take him off the mic as much because he's driving our minutes up. We're getting in trouble for how long Kenny talks. So we had to pull him off. We had to pull Kenny off, put him on camera duty and on mic duty, and then let me and Gabe talk. That's my understanding.
You guys are the professionals. I'm just the noob, and I'm sitting over here I'm putting time out right now. Christian put me in timeout within 2 weeks. It didn't take long.
Noob?
All right.
You're a noob?
Well, yeah, he is a noob. Well, we're going to get to it. A lot of people are probably expecting us to start with basketball, but we got two football guys here, so we're going to start with football. And if you don't like that, you can skip to basketball. But Gabe and I are both football guys, so that's where we're going to start. Memphis over the weekend loses 34-31 in the season finale against SMU. Another heartbreaker for Memphis to end the season. Gabe, just quick thoughts on the game and the way that Memphis closed the season out.
Another microcosm of what the past 2 years have been, right? Like it's just getting there, putting yourself in a position to win, and then in those situational moments, in those moments where you're supposed to be able to make a play to win a ball game, they just fall short. You get there to the end. Like there's a lot of ways they could have won that game. There's a lot of different things throughout the 4 quarters that you could take back and try to redo. But you just have to zoom in on that last sequence, right? You get down, goal to go, situation where you're down by 3, you kick a field goal, you can get to overtime on the road against a decent SMU team, and you roll your quarterback out left. I think a bad play call in general. You roll your quarterback out left away from his handedness, away from his right arm. And then I think Seth added insult to injury by making one of the worst throws and decisions I think he's made at Memphis. But that game in the end is not the issue. I think it's just what we saw rear its ugly head is a reoccurring thing. And over the past 2 years, how many games have they lost like that? It's frustrating.
Too many
it's very
to count.
frustrating. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree a little bit because I don't hate the play call. I mean, you're not playing to go. I don't hate the decision to go for a touchdown. How about that?
Of course, no. I think you do in that situation, 100%.
Yeah, so I agree. I agree with that. With you on probably booting out to the left. I understand it, shorten the field. I think the thought process behind that, and you can either agree or disagree with this, but I think the thought process is roll it to a side of the field, shorten the field. You basically have one or two reads. If it's not there, throw it away, get it out of bounds. Is what I believe is the plan in that situation.
Right.
I don't think it's not to force a throw there. You don't want to force a throw in that situation.
And again, that's why I say Seth added insult to injury by making just an awful decision. I mean, just lobbed it up there. And Gabe Rogers, you could tell, had sort of given up on the play. And the fact that ball was in bounds and sort of lobbed up there, he was surprised to see that. And I understand rolling out. You know what I mean? I understand moving the pocket in that situation because we've seen so far this year, the offensive line. I mean, we can talk about the run game separately, but even in straight drop back passing situations, it's a struggle. The pocket will collapse. The edges will get burned around. Seth gets a little shaky. His pocket presence isn't quite what it should be. He's still a young player learning. So I understand moving the pocket. The only thing I'm saying about the play call is rolling away from where his arm is always tough. It's just a tough throw. You have to set your feet. And you're not going to get a whole lot of mustard on it. And you saw right there just wasn't a whole lot behind that throw when he actually put it up in the end zone.
Absolutely. I do think I know we're not moral victory. None of us are moral victory type people. And it's hard to take anything good away from a loss in the season finale because the season's over. Yes, you have a bowl game, but it's like, how much does it carry in the next season? Because it's going to be a completely different team. But I do think one thing that it was encouraging to see at least a little bit is the run game was solid. And we haven't seen that over the last several years. It has been a struggle to run the ball. And Memphis, they really were successful in running the ball against SMU, and that's what kept them in the game. It's what extended drives. It's what got them into the end zone multiple times. So I think that was a good thing because I know you mentioned the run game and the struggles of it. But this game, they got it rolling. I think they had a good rotation of running backs. I would have liked to see Sutton Smith a little bit more.
Right.
But we saw them get these guys out in space, let them move. The offensive line was getting pushed. So it was encouraging in that fact. But I don't know, Gabe, how much can you really take away from that?
I don't know how much you can take away because even if you look at the stats, 33 for 152, 4.6 average, like I don't know how much you're just going to hang your hat on that. Like that, your run game, let's think about it. Like 2017, 2018, 2019, the Cotton Bowl year, like that's what got them over the hump is just a great run game. I mean, in 18, they had 2,000-yard rushers. In 19, Kenny Gainwell. And all those guys were averaging up around 6-7 yards per carry. Really getting it established on first and second down, keeping yourself ahead of the chains. I thought the run game was better this weekend. Jay Ducker, I thought, had his best game in a Tiger uniform outside the one run against Mississippi State that he broke late. But 10 carries for 81 yards. I thought he looked solid. But I just don't know if there's anything that you can look at in that particular game and really say this is something that they can replicate going forward. And honestly, I don't know in the macro if that type of running performance, if you want to be in the new AAC, if you want to be an 8, 9, 10 win team, I don't know if in the macro that's enough, the running performance that you got this weekend. But there was some signs of life in game 12, even though there's been some ups and downs this year. That's one thing about this team. They haven't quit. There's been no quit in this team whatsoever, even when they were down 35-0 at halftime to Tulane. I mean, they have fought every step of the way. It just hasn't gone to plan. That's just the truth of it.
Yeah, so with that loss in the season finale, it's kind of put a bow on this season. We don't know which bowl game Memphis is going to yet. Obviously, that'll come within the next couple of weeks when they play. We should hear, relatively shortly. I would imagine it's this week, right? They'll announce bowl games either. No, on Sunday after conference championship. So we'll know on Sunday where Memphis plays, and that will put a wrap on this season. So looking forward to next year, what needs to happen to boost this program? What needs to happen to get Memphis back to what they were 4 or 5 years ago, competing for an AAC championship?
And I know I'm going to say, it's funny, I'm going to sound cliche because of O-linemen, but you need to strengthen the offensive line. You need to strengthen the defensive line. You have to find a way, and I'm not saying wholesale changes, because you're going to have some guys returning, like Jacob Likes will be back on the offensive line, Jonah Gamble, and obviously we'll see what happens on the transfer portal. Maybe those guys have, I don't know what their other options are and what they want to do. But I think you have to make some relative wholesale changes on the offensive line, and maybe that has to do with leadership, right? Maybe Jim Bridge, maybe that whole thing's run its course. Maybe you have to find different leadership within that locker room. Obviously, I'm not here calling for anybody's job, but if something doesn't work, it's insanity to keep trying to do the same thing, right? So we'll see what they do. I think offensive line, defensive line, and the other thing they have to absolutely attack is secondary members. You're going to lose Quindell Johnson. You're going to lose some depth pieces on that side. They're getting older and older and older. You have to find a way to get another defensive playmaker like Quindell, and I think you have to do that in the secondary, try to strengthen it. But it's tough in this day and age, because while you're trying to go get guys could leave. You have to worry about roster retention while you're trying to add to your roster. So this staff's got their work cut out for them, no question.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say the biggest thing for this team moving forward, how do you get back to success? How do you get back to being one of the top non-Power 5 programs in the country? You got to get playmakers. That's what this brand has been built off of over the last decade almost, has been playmakers. It's having guys like Anthony Miller, Tony Pollard, Darrell Henderson, Patrick Taylor. I mean, the list, Calvin Alston, DeMonte Coxey, the list goes on and on, of big-time guys that this program has had and put into the NFL and were productive at the collegiate level. And Memphis just didn't have that this year. They went out 2 years ago and got Eddie Lewis, or last year and got Eddie Lewis. This year they go and get Joe Skates. And they're both kind of up and down. You haven't had consistent production out of either one of them. And as far as the backfield goes, you go get Jay Ducker, same thing, inconsistent, up and down. Asa Martin, who they got also a few years ago as a transfer, up and down, explosive in some games wouldn't show up. So it's like you've got to go find the guy that's going to consistently get you in scoring position and consistently be a threat to score from anywhere on the field, because it's the foundation of the program. Has the defense ever been in the past 6 to 8 years? Has the defense ever been what carried this team? Absolutely not. The secondary's been bad. The defensive line has been okay at times. They've been an opportunistic defense always. They've always seemed to make plays in big-time moments, but it's not what carries this team. And I don't think that you're going to get those guys that, those defensive guys that can carry this team. I don't think it happens in this conference. It's hard to have a really good defense in the American Conference. That's just the truth of the matter. What Cincinnati did 2 years ago, I mean, you can't replicate that. You're not going to get Ahmad Gardner and Myjai Sanders and some of the. That's not going to happen. Like, that is few and far between. So the focus has to be getting playmakers. If they don't believe that Seth is the guy under center, they've got to go attack it in the transfer portal, or maybe they've got someone on roster that they like right now. Maybe Tevin Carter is the guy that they think for the future. But I don't think skill position-wise they have the guys on this team to do that yet. Right. I think they have got to attack the transfer portal, continue to build this recruiting class, and get guys that are going to do so. I mean, another guy that just popped in my head, Taj Washington, did a great job, recruited him, developed him. Unfortunately, he transferred to USC, but that's what you got to do.
Too. He's balling, too, down the stretch of the season for USC.
I think he scored touchdown on Saturday, correct?
Yeah, he I believe he did, but he's been sort of their second guy outside of Jordan Addison, and he's rolling. He's a guy that was on this roster at one point, and I'll say this: I think they have some playmakers. I think they're just completely devoid of talent on the outside, but they're just inconsistent, and I think that's what you're talking about. Like Caden Prescorn, you have for another year. That's probably, like, I look at him. Like I look at a lot of these big, strong tight ends who catch a lot of balls in college. Like I don't see why he wouldn't be sort of an NFL style guy. He's 6'5", 255 pounds. Like you're going to have him for another year. Javon Ivory, who's been a little bit up and down, a little more consistent down the stretch of this season. You're going to have him for another year. Gabe Rogers is gone. Eddie Lewis is gone. Joe Skates, I know how inconsistent he's been as far as just catching the ball, running the right routes, understanding the playbook. But if he can ever unlock, and we've seen it in, like, we've seen some brilliance and flashes for him, right? Like if he can ever unlock and get more consistent, he has a big opportunity to be a big difference maker for this team. And like there's some other guys too that are still young that need to sort of figure it out, like Cam Wright. Rock Taylor's a guy that they seem to trust. But I do agree, like they got like a guy like Antonio Gibson out of JUCO, right? Finding some guys that are ready to rock, finding some guys that are ready to go at that level, I think is something that they can go do. And I think the good news is last year we saw them try to attack the transfer portal a little, or not the transfer portal, but the JUCO ranks in the transfer portal a little bit harder. I mean, they got Davion Carter on the O-line out of the transfer portal. Joe Skates, again, like they've tried to find guys in the past few years that are ready to rock. But it's going to be a work in progress. And I wonder who else is out there that could really fit the mold of the type of playmaker that's going to make a massive difference for this offense.
Yeah, I would say that Ryan Silverfield and the staff are going to have major eyes on Power 5 dropbacks, guys that were higher ranked coming out of high school and didn't pan out at that level for whatever reason. The guys that are at lower ranked schools that are balling out, can they bring in some of those guys? So those are a big piece, but I totally agree with you on the development side of it, because that's where these guys came from, right? Calvin Austin, walk on. DeMonte Coxey was actually a pretty highly rated guy that was committed to LSU at one point. Darrell Henderson, low ranked guy. Tony Pollard, low ranked local guy. Like none of these guys have been world beaters coming out of high school. They just have found the talent and developed it, and that's what you got to do.
Is there a conversation to be had about, recruiting rankings? I think at the big schools, like when you look at SEC, like you look at A&M having the number one recruiting class, Alabama, Georgia, like I don't know if it should be just a massive selling point at Memphis that you have the top ranked recruiting class. I think there's something to it. Like, again, you just mentioned it with Norvell. I thought Norvell was a good recruiter, but he found guys in between the cracks that could play. Fuente, same thing. Like, I think at this level, you have to find guys who really fit in and are ready to work. And sometimes those higher level recruits that end up at a place like Memphis may not be what they look like in recruiting rankings on 247, on Rivals, right? So we'll see. And by the way, I mentioned Eddie Lewis earlier. I believe he has one more year because of COVID, or I can't do the math anymore.
Yeah,
I can't do that. Like the COVID, the COVID year math always confuses me at this point.
Yeah, the COVID year, the medical red shirts, it's too much at this point. Like guys are my age still playing in college, and that's where we're at right now. Obviously not the season that the staff wanted, the players wanted, the fans wanted. Definitely a bit of a disappointment. To finish 500 is not what anyone had in mind as far as local. I think national, This is about what people expected of Memphis, but there was a higher just kind of a higher feel of what this team could do. You got something? Yeah,
I was just saying, like, the leash is just shorter now for Ryan Silverfield and the staff. That's the truth of the matter now. 2 straight years where you go 6-6, 3-5 in conference. Like the fans, the people in the athletic department, we at this point know what the program could be. So 2 straight years of that headed into a lower level AAC is just – that leash is going to be shorter, and he's going to have to prove a lot of the people that are sort of off of his bandwagon wrong. And I think there's a fair amount of the fan base who are feeling that way at this moment. And I can't say I fully blame them. but he's going to have his chance to right the wrongs that have been sort of troubling him these past 2 years next year.
All right, Gabe. So before we wrap up football, some news broke last night that both Seth Henigan and Ryan Silverfield will be back at Memphis for this year. I know both of those things have kind of been in flux as far as the fan base is concerned. There's been a lot of chatter about, will this be Ryan's last year? Will they get rid of him? Will Seth enter the transfer portal? Will he be coming back? So what does this news mean for Memphis moving into the 2023 season after the bowl game?
Well, for Ryan, I'm not surprised, right? Like I figured 6-6 bowl game, 9th straight bowl would save his job. Again, that leash becomes shorter for him. The bigger news is the fact that Seth is basically, there's sort of an announcement, a report that he's going to show back up on campus, because in this day and age of transfer portal, that's continually the question about, okay, you have this talented guy from Texas, who has a father who's really high up in high school football. He probably has connections just about everywhere in that state. And he's spit out a lot of players to various colleges. Maybe he has connections with coaches, but to be able to have him back, Seth, in this day and age, just shows the relationship that's being built. It may not, the results on the field with Ryan and him may have been a little bit rocky to this point, but that relationship staying stable, and to have a stable situation at your quarterback position is always massive in college football, because there's a lot of teams out here in the country this offseason who are going to have that position in flux, and they're not going to know what to do with it. And it's good for, I know 6-6 and 3-5 in conference is still tough, but to be able to have a guy you trust in that position in particular is massive, massive going forward.
Yeah, and I'll be very, very interested to see what the chatter is and what the storylines are going into next season with Seth coming back, because you have people that think he's really good and can continue to lead this program, and you have people that are kind of like, well, let's see what Tevin Carter or one of these younger guys has. So I would imagine that will be the storyline that we hear the majority of spring practice is, is Seth going to be the starter? Is someone else going to come up behind him and take that job? So it should lead for another interesting offseason. But with Memphis football wrapping their season up after the bowl game, Memphis basketball really just getting underway. They were in Orlando this weekend for the ESPN Invitational tournament, and it did not go wonderfully. It wasn't terrible, but it certainly wasn't great. Obviously, beginning the tournament with an absolutely heartbreaking loss against Seton Hall. I mean,
brutal, man. That was so brutal. Come on.
That's where battered fan syndrome comes from, man.
Right.
That's like, I heard so many people like, this is so Memphis. And I was kind of thinking, you know what? This is pretty Memphis. Like, this makes sense.
Right.
So beginning the tournament with the loss to Seton Hall, beating Nebraska, and then beating Stanford to end the tournament. They covered in both of those games, covered the line in both of those games. But it kind of all starts and ends with that Seton Hall game. What do you think, Gabe? What did you think when that shot went in?
Man, I mean, it's just terrible, right? I thought they played a decent game up until then. They're never going to be a great shooting team. They're never going to be offensively just a juggernaut, I don't think. But I thought they played well enough to win that game. And Tyree Samuel, who banked that damn thing in, was like, he's hit 2 threes the entire year, and they were both against Memphis. And one was that bank in prayer at the buzzer. I mean, that's brutal for the Tigers, because that, I think by the time we sort of open up the net ranking quad talk, like that will be sort of borderline quad 1. You want that type of win, because I look at the rest of their wins. Stanford, Nebraska, probably not going to be in that quad 1 talk. The two potential ones are probably SLU and Seton Hall. VCU, I'm not quite sure about, but Seton Hall was one that you wanted badly for resume discussions, and it gets torn away from you last second. Now, I thought they rebounded well, though. I mean, Nebraska and Stanford, what they were able to do, convincing, start to finish, squat down and defended the whole time. But that Seton Hall one just sticks in the craw, because you think, okay, maybe they could have had a 3-0 finish in the ESPN Events Invitational, but it just doesn't end that way.
Yeah, like I said, all I could think of when it went in was, Matt, that is batter fan syndrome. That is what drives it. So it was obviously a heartbreaker for Memphis fans to see that shot fall, especially in the first game on Thanksgiving night. I mean, it just doesn't get any more painful than that. But I agree, they did rebound well. They didn't play, two of the better teams in the tournament after losing to Seton Hall. But all you can do is play the opponent that's put in front of you. And like I said, they covered in both of those games, which is always good. If you're favored in a game and you win by that, that's a good thing to me. At least it shows that,
Right.
That you're doing about what you're expected to do, if not better. So covering in both of those games is a good sign. And you mentioned the defensive end of the floor, and that's what the story of the tournament was for Memphis. And I believe Kenny will probably know this, so he can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Kendrick Davis tweeted after the game, like, Penny challenged us defensively after the Seton Hall game, and it was awesome to see the way the team responded. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but it was something like that. And it's absolutely true, because 70-69 was the score of the Seton Hall game, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. So you allow 70 points, and Penny doesn't like allowing points, so you come back and you absolutely shut down Nebraska and Stanford, and I believe they held Stanford to 29% from the floor for the game. So the defensive end of the floor, once again, Kenny and I have kind of been discussing and alluding to this all year. The defensive end of the floor, 93% of the games is not going to be an issue. It's not going to be a problem. Very few teams will give Memphis trouble defensively. It's the offensive end of the floor. And what Kenny and I have been saying is the offense goes as Kendrick Davis goes, and that was the case the entire weekend. And he wasn't necessarily extremely efficient throughout the weekend. He had some poor shooting performances, and you see Memphis's offense slump when he doesn't shoot well.
Right.
So it really is. It's like what we've been talking about since the first episode that we did. It's that back and forth. It's that give and take that we're going to see all year. Defensive end of the floor is probably going to hold them up, and Kendrick Davis is going to have to lead the way on offense.
Yeah, this team, the conversations in the offseason are really coming to fruition. Like you can definitely see what is happening in front of our eyes. This is a very high floor team because of how old they are. They make a lot less mistakes. I mean, I was looking up the turnover numbers because they were 352nd last year in turnovers. They're only at 195 this year in turnovers per game, which is a massive difference that helps you win ball games. But this is just a high floor team. Ceiling's not all that high. Kendrick Davis, it's going to go as Kendrick Davis goes. But by the end of the year, where do we expect this team to be? I mean, I would venture to say, sort of, if we're talking NCAA tournament, which I think that's what everybody wants to talk about, probably a double-digit seed, grand scheme of things. Because I don't think this year they've shown fully the ability to beat really good sort of quad one territory teams. And I wonder if that's something that they'll learn as they continue to go on, but they're going to run out of these opportunities. And I think the big test, of course, will be sort of those back-to-back games, Auburn and Alabama. We'll really see what this team's made out of from on a national stage then.
Yeah, and I think going back to, the high floor of this team, because I think you're absolutely right. It's still about finding the third guy. It's still about finding the guy that can put up points and that Kendrick Davis can defer to when he's not on. And we see, guys stepping up a little bit, and then you kind of fall back into the background. So it's like, when is it consistently going to come up? When are they going to consistently have the guy that can score opposite Kendrick Davis when he does have an off shooting night? Because I think right now what it is if Kendrick Davis is off, Penny's like, just keep shooting. And I don't blame him. I mean, Kendrick Davis is the best player in the American Conference. So by all means, keep on shooting. But there has to be, option number 2 and option number 3 to beat some of these top level teams that you're talking about that Memphis will play in December, because that is, it's not conference schedule, but it's the meat of this early schedule. It's really the test of this early schedule. And I think they're going to have to be able to score points at a more efficient clip and at a higher clip if they're going to knock some of those teams off. And if they're going to really do damage in the American Athletic Conference, they got to have guys that score. We know the American's a pretty defensive-heavy conference anyway, so there are usually a lot of ugly, low-scoring matchups, which benefits Memphis. But there's going to be those games where somebody locks Kendrick Davis down.
Yeah.
It used to be Memphis. Memphis used to be the team that had Kendrick Davis's number pretty much every time, and they had other options. They had other guys that could shoot from the perimeter. They had other guys that could get down low, and Memphis just hasn't found that yet. I know they have guys that are kind of in the wings waiting to see what's going to happen, and that could be the difference, absolutely. But we can't talk about that yet. When that comes, we can talk about that and we can see it for what it is. But as of right now, that's the biggest question that surrounds them.
And DeAndre continues to be like the most helpful guy on the team. It's not a surprise by any stretch of the imagination. Like, he's the do-it-all, everything guy. Probably doesn't have the best shot in the world, but he'll take it and he'll make it every once in a while. But I like to see him sometimes taking a little bit of the burden off of Kendrick within the flow of the offense, him trying to distribute, him trying to be a focal point. That helps. But you're right. I mean, like, the third prong, if you will, offensively for this team's just not there. And again, I think what you're referring to is DeMaurier Franklin, and like, if he could ever get eligible, we don't know if that's going to happen. Penny speaks the world of him. Penny says he's by far the best we have in regards to getting that offense going. Like, he's a great offensive piece, but we just don't know what's going to happen with him. Keontae Kennedy's been up and down. Elijah McCadden, I like what he brings to the table, but he's been up and down. They just have to find it a different way. And the great equalizer for them always is going to be squatting down and defending. And they have done that at a high level so far this year. And that's why they're still, you look at some of these metrics, you look at KenPom, you look at different rankings, like KenPom has them at 27th. That's why they're still there, is because the metrics defensively will prop them up consistently throughout the year.
Absolutely. Even when the offense is inconsistent, the defense more than likely won't be. Kenny, you ready to jump on for a second? I need you for a minute.
I'm here, man. I'm here. Let's go.
Okay. You're engaged again. So you and I on the podcast last week talked about Alex Lomax, and for fans to kind of take it for what it is, appreciate him for what he is, understand that he's not Kendrick Davis and never will be. He had a very, very good weekend in Orlando. So I just wanted to give you the floor and give you a minute to kind of talk about Alex and how this played into exactly what we were saying last week.
Well, I mean, he added points to the equation too. We talked about how you can't look at a box score at the end of a game and say, you determine whether or not Alex was successful out there by his field goals attempted and his field goals made. I mean, even the ESPN announcer said the same thing all over the broadcast, saying, Alex brings so much more to the table, and we agree with him, right? Like, Alex is not going to ever be the guy that can be the focal point on your offense, but it's the stuff that he does on the back end, man. Like, it's the way that he controls the team. It's the way that he plays defense. It's like what Gabe has said, squatting down and playing defense. He is a hellacious on-ball defender. He is one of the best in the conference at that. And so the fact that he added points to the equation, especially in this Stanford game, was a huge win for the Tigers. And any point you get from him, I think it should be considered a plus for the Tigers. Like, this is super helpful. But I mean, obviously, man, like, I'm a big Alex Lomax fan. I love his game. I love what he brings to the table. I think the disrespect and the narrative about Alex needs to change, because you've got to be able to look at a game, and instead of judging a game based off of field goals made, you've got to be able to be a little bit more nuanced in how you view a game and or how you view success on a court. And everything that Alex does, of course, he's going to have turnovers. He's got the ball in his hands a lot. Of course, he's going to have turnovers. That's okay. But he's also one of the only guys that that is constantly back on defense. Like, he is always in the fray. Every single time there's a ball on the ground, he's on the floor. Those are huge things. And on top of that, he's also he's the emotional and spiritual leader of that team. You can see the way that people respond to him. And no matter who it is that comes into the Tigers facility on their team, whether it's a new guy, whether it's a young kid, whether whoever it is, Alex is that dude. And so all of those intangibles, everything that he brings to the table is successful. And the fact that he added points to the equation is just a cherry on top.
And for him, 9 steals in 3 games this weekend. Like, you see the defensive prowess. It's unbelievable what he's able to bring to the floor. At times. Now, I will say, I think he gets a bad rap because of how much Penny trusts him and how much he's asked to go out there and play 35 minutes per game, even when he doesn't have his best stuff, right? And like you talk about the turnovers, yeah, it'll happen. But I think in the end of the day, he is asked by Penny to play maybe a few more minutes than he should, even when he doesn't have it that night. And we need to have a conversation maybe about sort of like when Penny sees it going south with Alex, maybe he needs to pull him and give somebody else those minutes at times. I know what he provides on the defensive end, but when he was, I forget how many shots he went in a row without making one, the 2 games before the ESPN Events Invitational. When that type of stuff is happening and it's becoming a little bit too much for you to overcome, in the end of the day, maybe pull him out and give those minutes to someone else for just a short period of time, and then let Alex get back to what he wants to do, right? Let him get some time off and then come back in and provide what he needs to provide.
Christian, we've had conversations for the entirety of Penny's career here where there is not concern, but just questioning some of the lineup decisions that are made. Sometimes it's confusing, right? And we talk about slow starts, that the Tigers have had, that just getting over that hump in the first 5-6 minutes, getting some points on the board, setting a tone offensively has been a massive struggle this year so far. And I attribute that to a weird starting lineup right now. And I recognize that there is, as a coach, that you have to be able to trust the guys that you have playing for you on the court. But do you think that having Jaden Hardaway, Alex Lomax, and Chandler Lawson on the floor to start the game alongside DeAndre and Kendrick is what might be the cause of some of the slow starts? Because you're literally taking 3 guys that are limited offensively and putting them on the floor for an extended period of time where there is a struggle to get over that hump, I guess, initially on the offensive side of the floor. You're basically saying, hey, defense, guard DeAndre and Kendrick, and we're just going to let Alex and Jaden and Chandler kind of do their thing. Do you think adding a guy like Keontae to the starting lineup, or Demaria Franklin when he becomes eligible, do you think that will help kind of jumpstart the Tiger offense early on?
Yeah, because I don't think this was Penny's plan from the beginning. I don't think he wants to play Chandler and Alex and who else did you say?
Jaden Hardaway.
Totally lost. Jaden, yeah. I don't think that's the combination that he wants to necessarily go out there with, because he knows about their offensive deficiencies. I really think Demaria Franklin not being available is hurting this lineup, and we all know that. But I think that's. And we can't say that he's going to alleviate everything, because we don't know. We don't know. We haven't seen him this year. From all reports, from Penny and from the players, he's going to bring a big part to this offense, but we don't know that yet. But I do believe that's got to fix something, because I think, and Penny's obviously a basketball mind, and he has a very, and I've harped on this all year, the staff is amazing. These guys know basketball very, very well. They're not gonna look at all these metrics, and you don't have to look at metrics. It doesn't pass the eye test offensively, that starting lineup right now. But I think it's, like you said, it's what he trusts. It's what he wants to throw out there at first. It's the guys that he wants on the floor to set the tone, especially on the defensive end. But he needs Demaria Franklin, or he needs Keontae Kennedy, or he needs Elijah McCadden. Someone has got to be injected into that starting lineup. Whatever it is.
Do you remember in 2020 when DeAndre transferred to Memphis and he was ineligible for the first 12 games of the year, I think, and then all of a sudden, I think it was against Tulane in Tulane.
It was. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
He was eligible. The starting lineup came out. DeAndre wasn't a part of it, and then he came into the game. And it was an
clicked, and it all
injection
clicked.
of life.
Yep.
Remember that?
Mhm.
And that's how
Yeah.
I feel. That's how I feel like when you hear Penny talk about DeMaurier, that's how he sort of talks about him. It feels very similar in regards to what he could provide for the team. So it's frustrating. And there's always sort of been that savior, right? Like that people want to talk about. Like, I don't know. I mean, there's been random ones. I think DeAndre and DeMaurier are different, but like Jordan Nesbitt was one at one point. Like there's been a bunch of guys where it's like, oh, when we get this guy, we'll really be rolling. I do think DeMaurier can be that guy, but this team and what you're talking about with the starting lineup, it's very clear that Penny has said, screw shooting, screw playing offense. We are going to defend. And since he has done that, I mean, he started doing that against VCU. They've allowed 47, 70, which is the outlier, 61 and 48, right? So that starting lineup, like offensively, they are not inclined. Like they're not guys that are going to go get you buckets ever, generally speaking. But I think it's worked on the defensive end. And a guy like Chandler Lawson, while I question what he can do offensively, he seems to be a vocal leader out there, getting people in the right places and trying to play on the defensive side. So
to me, it's not.
We'll see.
To me, it's not Chandler and Alex. I actually kind of understand the Alex and KD backcourt starting off. I get it. I can see it. I can understand why that's the case. And I will never, ever be the guy to bang on Jaden Hardaway because I think that kid has a role on this team. And I think he is just – is he ever going to be a dynamic offensive player? No, but he is somebody that very rarely makes mistakes. And let's be real, man. In college basketball, having somebody out there that very rarely makes mistakes is a massive deal. And so I think Jaden Hardaway absolutely has earned minutes and deserves to play on this team. I just wonder if adding a Keontae Kennedy to that third guard position to like loosen up a little bit, to loosen up that defense to start off because while Jaden Hardaway is probably a better defender than Keontae Kennedy is a much better offensive player. He spreads the floor out. He has the ability to get around opponents to the basket. We saw it in the game against Stanford, man, that he detonated on that Stanford big guy. Like it was crazy. So those are the little switches to me. Now, again, I've said this for a long time. Penny's playing chess while we're all playing checkers. So I'm not sitting here saying he's messing up by doing this, but I just wonder if coming out from, this, what I view as a pretty successful weekend in Orlando, if we'll see a change, and especially when Mars is available, will we see a change? And if that happens, man, if we start to see that, if they can get off the floor or get onto the floor and get going offensively quickly, this team's ceiling has increased exponentially for me because they have guys that can take over. You see what DeAndre Williams can do when he doesn't foul out in 10 minutes. Like DeAndre is an effective ball player, and I know for a fact that guy was devastated as much as Tiger fans were that he played such a poor game against Seton Hall. But they were without their second best player for 30 minutes of that game. And it took a buzzer beater by a dude who never shoots three-pointers to beat them. They are a much better team they're a much better team with DeAndre than without him. And I think that those are some of the things that I think we'll see change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we'll see that mesh at some point. Let's just say in some hypothetical, theoretical world, DeMario Franklin was to never be eligible this year. I still think we would see that mesh at some point in this season. I think they would figure it out. And I completely agree with you. I think once they do, the ceiling of this team is increased. Maybe not exponentially, but it does go up. It most certainly goes up if you are 70-75% effective on the offensive end of the floor as you are on the defensive end of the floor. It changes this team, and it changes the outlook for the season and what they can do. But guys, we are at 46 minutes right now, so we're running pretty long. Either one of you guys got anything else, any other points you want to hit on before we jump out of here?
I want to say one last thing, Gabe. I'm a big believer in reading and listening and understanding body language by coaches.
Yeah.
Penny loves this team. You heard him. He is not the kind of guy. You heard him. I mean, if shit was going sideways like it did last year, he doesn't mind coming out in the media and saying that it was going sideways. But one of the things that you don't hear him do often is glow and praise his teams the way that he did after that Stanford game. And anybody who has played sports, who has coached at all, understands how easily the Tigers could have let go of the rope after that Seton Hall game. To play Nebraska and to play Stanford.
Got your heart ripped out. I mean, truthfully. You got your heart ripped out. You had to play the next day.
We're playing at 10 a.m. on a Sunday. Like, come on. Like, let's just get out of here and go home. But they didn't do that. They held onto the rope and they fought. And so that, to me, says a lot about this team, because we also know this about Penny. Penny's teams are infinitely better at the end of the year than they are at the beginning. And so if that holds true, this team, I think, has a shot. The only thing that we don't want to see happen is them dig themselves a hole like they have the last 3 years, where they can't
get it all, and then try to get it all in conference. You had to beat Houston twice just to put yourself in a position to make the tournament last year. So, like, in this year, I don't know if you'll be afforded the opportunity to go beat Houston. They're
the number one team in the country, baby.
Right, they're unbelievable. Like they're unbelievably good. But the last thing I wanted to add is, we were talking about the starting lineup. If I set the over-under at 4.5 different starting lineups for the rest of the year, I think both of you would probably take over, right?
Right.
Like this, like, you know, all that we're talking about, like, yeah, he's trying to force defense. He's trying to bring in Chandler, Alo. He's trying to throw in Jaden Hardaway that understand his system. I still think in a few more games we'll have a different starting lineup. And a few games after that, because he likes to do a little bit of experimenting to see who's going to be there as you get into the middle part of the season, toward the end of the season as well. But I do, one thing that's been an overwhelming positive is the control of his rotation this year.
100%.
For sure.
100%.
I mean, he has controlled the hell out of it, and he's not giving any more of those pity minutes. Those pity minutes are gone. If he doesn't think if you don't fit into the game plan to go win that particular game, you're not going to play.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question, Gabe. We'll do the over-under on the lineup changes, but let me ask you a question. We got to set some parameters here. How many players have to change for it to be considered a different starting lineup?
Just one. Just one. Come on.
So what if they go Chandler one game, Malcolm the next game, Chandler? Is that different starting lineups each game?
No, that would be, I mean, that would be if they played multiple games.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
so
like
the same starting lineup.
Yeah. I
think the only lineup change you're going to see consistently is probably Chandler and Malcolm. I think you'll see, depending on the matchup,
depending on
Malcolm,
the front court.
Yeah, depending on the front court matchup. Because Malcolm, and can we give Malcolm his flowers, guys? Like, I know Christian's trying to get us out of here, but can we just give Malcolm his flowers, man? That dude has played. He's been a force under the basket on the offensive side of the ball, but man, defensively, which has been his bugaboo his entire time he's been at Memphis, he has been a force on defense.
And even past that, he's had to fight through so much, man. Like the injuries and everything else. I mean, it's been a tough going for him at Memphis, and he hasn't really. It doesn't look like he's discouraged at all. I mean, he looks better than he ever has.
Yeah, and it's exactly what they need in the middle of that team, and it's something that Kenny and I have also hit on throughout the first 2 episodes. But guys, we are going to wrap it up. I am so excited to continue doing this, to have Gabe on board. The OGs, like Kenny said, know me and Gabe did Film Room a few years ago, and that was a ball. And so now to be able to come back and do this, I'm excited. Obviously excited to be with the old grumpy man over here.
I feel like I'm reunited with my long lost brothers, man. It's been forever. Yeah, I swear.
It's where we're at. It's where we're at. So this is awesome. I hope you guys are enjoying this so far. Hope you continue to enjoy it. Obviously, we're going to continue to get better every week, especially being live when we get there. I know we're waiting on some things, but when we get there, I promise you the show is going to be completely next level when we can be in front of each other, when we can screw around with each other and laugh and be a little more vocal to each other. It's going to be even better and even more fun. So we appreciate you guys. Ask that if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, leave us a comment anywhere where you get your podcast when you listen to this. Give us a rating, leave us a comment, leave us a review, whatever it is, subscribe. And I think that's it. You guys don't have anything else this time? We're good. Silence from everybody.
All good.
All right. We'll see you guys back here next week.
Thank you for listening to On the Bluff. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and a comment wherever you download your podcasts. Head over to www.bluffcitynil.com, where you will find comprehensive coverage of Tiger athletics and how you can become a contributor. We'll see you back here next week.